Hi, boys and girls. Welcome to a special edition of the Story Hour. My name is Carole Gooden, and I am the media specialist at Windmill Point Elementary School. Our first story is Merry Christmas, Strega Nona. It was the first Sunday of Advent, and everyone in the little town of Calabria was busy getting ready for Christmas, including Strega Nona, Grandma Witch. She was busy getting everything ready for the Christmas Eve feast that she prepared every year. Big Anthony, who worked for Strega Nona, was being kept busy too. "Anthony," said Strega Nona, "don't dawdle. There are only 4 weeks to Natale, Christmas, and there's so much to do. The whole house must be cleaned, and there's so much cooking and baking to do. After all, everybody in the town will be here." "Why can't Bambolona help?" whined Big Anthony. Bambolona was the baker's daughter who had come to stay with Strega Nona and learn her magic. "Bambolona has gone to help her father at the bakery," answered Strega Nona. With Christmas coming, the poor baker was in such trouble with so many people asking for special cakes and cookies that he didn't even have time to sit in the square with his friends. Bambolona and Strega Nona felt sorry for him, so Strega Nona sent Bambolona home to help. "Why don't you help the baker out with your magic, Strega Nona?" asked Big Anthony. "No, not at Christmas," said Strega Nona. "Now, go shake out those feather beds." "Anthony," said Strega Nona, "run down the hill to the town and get me a new broom, so we can sweep the house from top to bottom." "Oh, Strega Nona," said Big Anthony, "can't we sweep the house with magic?" "Not at Christmas time," said Strega Nona, so Big Anthony went down the hill to get a new broom. Strega Nona worked hard, cleaning the house from top to bottom, as the days of Advent went by. Each week she lit one more candle on the Advent wreath. And each day she sent Big Anthony on an errand down to the town. New brooms, new candles, new curtains, new bed covers, new tablecloth. "Anthony," said Strega Nona, "run down the hill and get me the bacala, the dried codfish for the Christmas stew. And when you get back, put it in the tub with water to soak it." "Soak it?" asked Big Anthony. "Yes," answered Strega Nona. "Every day until Christmas Eve, you must change the water so the fish will be nice and soft and not too salty for the Christmas stew." "Can't your magic do all that?" asked Big Anthony. No magic at Christmas time," said Strega Nona. "Christmas has a magic of its own." So Big Anthony set off down the hill. "Hello, Big Anthony," said one of the townspeople. "How's Strega Nona?" "Oh," said Big Anthony, "she is very busy getting the house ready for Christmas. Every day she sends me to town to get something. Every day she has me helping her clean windows, shake out the beds, paint the goat shed. She's getting ready to cook all kinds of things. I have to soak the codfish, the bacala, and change the water every day until Christmas Eve, and I'm tired." "Don't you know that Strega Nona loves Natale, Christmas?" a man from town asked. "That's why she's so busy. Why, she doesn't even have time to cure headaches and make love potions and get rid of warts. Every year she cleans her house and prepares a big feast and invites everyone," said a woman. "She invites everyone?" asked Big Anthony. "Everyone," said the woman. "Why, it wouldn't seem Natale without the feast at Strega Nona's house." "Hello, Big Anthony," said Bambolona, who was on her way to the bakery. "Are you in town to buy Strega Nona a Christmas gift?" "Oh, Bambolona, I want to talk with you about that, said Big Anthony. One by one, the days went by, and finally it was the day of Christmas Eve, La Vigilia di Natale. Now, Anthony, said Strega Nona, here is a long list of things for you to get for me. Flour, eggs, butter, spices, peppers, olives, oil, and sugar. Hurry down the hill and hurry right home again, for I have all kinds of things to cook and bake. Oh, Strega Nona, Big Anthony complained, can't you use... No magic at Christmas time, said Strega Nona. Now go. I have to decorate the house with the lemon blossoms and periwinkles. Strega Nona waited and waited and waited. No Big Anthony. Finally the sun began to set, and Big Anthony came whistling up the hill with empty hands. Anthony, said Strega Nona, standing in the doorway of her little house, where have you been? Oh, Strega Nona, there was a Christmas puppet show in the town square. It came all the way from Venice, up north. And where are all the things on my list? Oh, said Big Anthony, I forgot. Anthony, what am I going to do? It's Christmas Eve. There will be no cookies, no fried pastry, no roasted peppers. Oh, well, go get me the bacala so I can at least make the fish stew. Big Anthony came back holding the codfish. It was as stiff as a board. I forgot this too, said Big Anthony. I forgot to soak it in the water. Oh, Big Anthony, won't you ever learn? Cried Strega Nona. Now it's too late to prepare anything to eat for the feast. There's always your magic pasta pot, said Big Anthony timidly. No, I've told you before, no magic at Christmas, said Strega Nona. There will be no Christmas feast at Strega Nona's this year. Strega Nona sent Big Anthony to tell everyone not to come to her house for the feast. She looked at the lemon blossoms and periwinkles decorating the house. Outside, she heard the shepherds from Abruzzi, who came all the way down to Calabria to sing Christmas songs. The bells rang. It was time for the midnight mass. Sadly, Strega Nona went down the hill to the church. A fine Christmas this would be, with no company and no feast. The townspeople whispered as she went into the church. No feast, said one. Poor us, said another. Poor Strega Nona. When the mass was ended, Strega Nona went up to the big manger scene in the church. There beside the Virgin and St. Joseph lay the Holy Child. Ah, bambino, said Strega Nona, the night you were born it was not like this manger scene with all these people. You were all alone with your mama and St. Joseph, all alone, just like Strega Nona is tonight. Ah, anyway, happy birthday, bambino, and buon Natale. And Strega Nona slowly left the dark church and climbed to the hill to her little house. She opened the door and the room burst into light. Buon Natale! Merry Christmas, Strega Nona! Everyone cried. This year we're giving you a feast. Look, said Bambolona, codfish stew, roasted peppers, cookies, and fried pastry. Oh, Bambolona, said Strega Nona, did you do all this for Strega Nona? No, Strega Nona, said Bambolona. Big Anthony planned the whole surprise. Bravo, Big Anthony, everyone shouted. Merry Christmas, Strega Nona, said Big Anthony. Oh, Anthony, said Strega Nona, you have learned, and with no magic. "It's just like you said, Strega, Nona," Big Anthony smiled. "Christmas has a magic of its own." That was Merry Christmas, Strega, Nona by Tomie dePaola. Our next Christmas story is The Wild Christmas Reindeer by Jan Brett. Tika was excited and a little afraid. This year, Santa had asked her to get the reindeer ready to fly on Christmas Eve. Tika had never done this before, and she wanted everything to be perfect. Tika lived up in the Arctic in the shadow of Santa's winter farm. The last of the snow geese had flown south, and everyone's mind was on Christmas. The workshop was alive with the sounds of saws sawing, hammers hammering, and brushes painting as they worked to have the toys and presents ready for delivery on Christmas Eve. Tika knew it was time for her to go in search of the reindeer. They had been out on the tundra, wild and free since last Christmas, and Tika was sure they wouldn't want to go back to Winter Farm to train. She would have to be strong and firm. At last she found them, Bramble and Heather, Windswept and Lichen, Snowball, Crag, Twilight, and Tundra. Tika took a deep breath and shouted out, "Let's go! Move, move, move!" The reindeer were bewildered by Tika's voice. Their heads went up to see who this loud creature was. But they let her herd them together and head back toward Winter Farm. Tundra gave her the most trouble. Tika didn't know that he considered himself the leader and was not used to being bossed around. He liked to stay near Twilight, but she was separated from him and running near the front. When they got to the barn, Tika put them in different stalls. Tundra snorted impatiently. By the next morning, when Tika went into the barn, all the reindeer were restless and upset. Lichen was frightened of Crag, who kept nipping at him. Bramble was so worried she drove Heather wild, and Twilight kept calling out to Tundra, who was just plain angry and stamping his hooves. Tika groomed each reindeer. She wanted them to look sleek and glossy for Santa. One by one, she brushed and combed their coats and pushed and pulled at their tangled manes. She brushed so long and hard that their ears started to turn pink. Tika took the reindeer outside. Now she was ready for the real training to begin. Snowflakes danced in the air as she tried to stand them in two lines and put on their harnesses, but they wouldn't stay lined up. She had put Tundra at the back with Heather instead of at the front with Twilight, so he kicked out at Heather, who then bolted into Bramble. Tika scolded the reindeer. "Don't move," she cried, but they all ran off wild-eyed, and she had to go after them and bring them back. The next day, Tika harnessed the reindeer in the barn before taking them out into the snow. Everything went right until she got them lined up outside and tried to steer them first to the left and then to the right. To make the sleigh fly, they would need to pull together smoothly, but everything went wrong. Tundra crashed into Heather, Snowball blew up at Bramble, Windswept knocked over Twilight, and then Lichen locked antlers with Crag. "Stop!" Tika cried as she watched the reindeer paw the air. "Unhook!" she shouted as they tried to free their long antlers. Then Lichen and Crag fell over into the snow. The harder they pulled, the more their antlers locked. The reindeer were frantic, and Tika only made it worse by yelling at them. Tundra and Heather rushed to help, but the antlers did not break free. Windswept nudged at Lichen, and Bramble ran to help Crag. But the more they tried to help, the more they got tangled up themselves. Their necks strained and their muscles bulged, but their antlers did not budge. Tika wailed, "Oh, please, it's almost Christmas Eve." But the reindeer could not move. A frosty silence hung in the air. Tika looked at the tangled reindeer, once so bold and free, and began to cry. "It's my fault," she said. "I've spent all my time yelling at you instead of helping. I'm sorry." And one by one she gave each reindeer a hug. "Tomorrow," she said, "we'll go to work in a new way. No yelling, no screaming, and no bossing, I promise. Let me try to help you get free." The reindeer listened to this new voice. Heather's eyes sparkled. Crag cracked a reindeer grin. Bramble giggled and Snowball sighed. Tundra laughed and Twilight smiled. The more they laughed, the more they shook, and as they shook, their antlers rattled and rubbed. And before Tika could do anything, she heard a spring, spring, sprung sound. It was the antlers jiggling free. Quietly, Tika led the reindeer back to the barn. She sleeked their coats. She gently brushed their ears and combed out their manes. Tundra nuzzled her cheek. The next day, the reindeer lined up in 2 lines ready for the harness, with Twilight and Tundra leading the line. They practiced turning left and they practiced turning right. Tika directed them softly. Tundra pulled for Twilight. Bramble was gentle to Lichen. Windswept helped Heather, and Snowball nestled against Crag. Together they practiced long and hard. They didn't notice that it was getting dark, and they almost didn't hear a jingle in the distance. It was Santa, standing by the sleigh, piled high with presents and ready to go. Now the reindeer were ready too, and Tika led them to the sleigh. Santa smiled and nodded his thanks. Then he climbed aboard and waved to Tika, who watched as the wild reindeer rose up together and carried the sleigh off into the night. Merry Christmas. The Wild Christmas Reindeer by Jan Brett. Here's a favorite of mine, The Polar Express by Chris von Allsburg. On Christmas Eve, many years ago, I lay quietly in my bed. I did not rustle the sheets. I breathed slowly and silently. I was listening for a sound a friend had told me I'd never hear, the ringing bells of Santa's sleigh. "There's no Santa," my friend had insisted, but I knew he was wrong. Late that night, I did hear sounds, though not of ringing bells. From outside came the sounds of hissing steam and squeaking metal. I looked through my window and saw a train standing perfectly still in front of my house. It was wrapped in an apron of steam. Snowflakes fell lightly around it. A conductor stood at the open door of one of the cars. He took a large pocket watch from his vest, then looked up at my window. I put on my slippers and robe. I tiptoed downstairs and out the door. "All aboard!" the conductor cried out. I ran up to him. "Well," he said, "are you coming?" "Where?" I asked. "Why, to the North Pole, of course," was his answer. "This is the Polar Express." I took his outstretched hand and he pulled me aboard. The train was filled with other children, all in their pajamas and nightgowns. We sang Christmas carols and ate candies with nougat centers as white as snow. We drank hot cocoa as thick and rich as melted chocolate bars. Outside, the lights of towns and villages flickered in the distance as the Polar Express raced northward. Soon there were no more lights to be seen. We traveled through cold, dark forests where lean wolves roamed and white-tailed rabbits hid from our train as it thundered through the quiet wilderness. We climbed mountains so high it seemed as if we would scrape the moon, but the Polar Express never slowed down. Faster and faster we ran along, rolling over peaks and through valleys like a car on a roller coaster. The mountains turned into hills, the hills to snow-covered plains. We crossed a barren desert of ice, the great polar ice cap. Lights appeared in the distance. They looked like the lights of a strange ocean liner sailing on a frozen sea. "There," said the conductor, "is the North Pole." The North Pole. It was a huge city standing alone at the top of the world, filled with factories where every Christmas toy was made. At first, we saw no elves. "They're gathering at the center of the city," the conductor told us. "That is where Santa will give the first gift of Christmas." "Who receives the first gift?" we all asked. The conductor answered, "He will choose one of you." "Look," shouted one of the children, "the elves!" Outside, we saw hundreds of elves. As our train drew closer to the center of the North Pole, we slowed to a crawl. So crowded were the streets with Santa's helpers. When the Polar Express could go no farther, we stopped and the conductor led us outside. We pressed through the crowd to the edge of a large open circle. In front of us stood Santa's sleigh. The reindeer were excited. They pranced and paced, ringing the silver sleigh bells that hung from their harnesses. It was a magical sound, like nothing I had ever heard. Across the circle, the elves moved apart and Santa Claus appeared. The elves cheered wildly. He marched over to us and, pointing to me, said, "Let's have this fellow here." He jumped into his sleigh. The conductor handed me up. I sat on Santa's knee and he asked, "Now, what would you like for Christmas?" I knew that I could have any gift I could imagine, but the thing I wanted most for Christmas was not inside Santa's giant bag. What I wanted more than anything was one silver bell from Santa's sleigh. When I asked, Santa smiled. Then he gave me a hug and told an elf to cut a bell from a reindeer's harness. The elf tossed it up to Santa. He stood holding the bell high above him and called out, "The first gift of Christmas." A clock struck midnight as the elves roared their approval. Santa handed the bell to me, and I put it in my bathrobe pocket. The conductor helped me down from the sleigh. Santa shouted out the reindeers' names and cracked his whip. The team charged forward and climbed into the air. Santa circled once above us, then disappeared in the cold, dark polar sky. As soon as we were back inside the Polar Express, the other children asked to see the bell. I reached into my pocket, but the only thing I felt was a hole. I had lost the silver bell from Santa's sleigh. "Let's hurry outside and look for it," one of the children said. But the train gave a sudden lurch and started moving. We were on our way home. It broke my heart to lose the bell. When the train reached my house, I sadly left the other children. I stood at my doorway and waved goodbye. The conductor said something from the moving train, but I couldn't hear him. "What?" I yelled out. He cupped his hands around his mouth. "Merry Christmas," he shouted. The Polar Express let out a loud blast from its whistle and sped away. On Christmas morning, when my little sister Sarah and I opened our presents, it looked as if everything had been unwrapped. Sarah found one last small box behind the tree. It had my name on it. Inside was the silver bell. There was a note. "Found this on the seat of my sleigh. Fix that hole in your pocket. Signed, Mr. C." I shook the bell. It made the most beautiful sound my sister and I had ever heard. But my mother said, "Oh, that's too bad." "Yes," said my father, "it's broken." When I'd shaken the bell, my parents had not heard a sound. At one time, most of my friends could hear the bell, but as years passed, it fell silent for all of them. Even Sarah found one Christmas that she could no longer hear its sweet sound. Though I've grown old, the bell still rings for me as it does for all who truly believe. The Polar Express by Chris van Allsburg. My own special bell that Santa Claus left for me one year. Babushka is an old Russian folk tale told at Christmas time. One night, a long, long time ago, Babushka was sweeping the floor of her little cottage. She lived there alone, and all who knew her said she was the best housekeeper in the village. Every day, Babushka swept, polished, and dusted to keep the cottage bright and shining. She worked from the glimmer of dawn to the shadows of night. And this night was no different under the wide Russian sky. Babushka was finishing her chores before she went to bed. The polishing, the dusting, and almost all the cleaning had been done. She opened the door to her cottage to sweep the snow from her doorstep. The cold air reddened her nose and nipped at her ears. As Babushka swept, the air around her grew warm and fragrant. Raising her head, she smelled cinnamon, like the cinnamon in the pies she often baked. "Is my neighbor Anyushka baking at this hour?" she asked herself. I doubt it. But the scent became stronger, so Babushka stopped her sweeping and peered down the road. Through the swirling snow, she could see a procession entering the village. It seemed longer and more splendid than any she'd seen for the Tsar. The leader was riding a humped beast with long legs. They glided across the snow, followed by a line of carts and torch-bearers. All moved in silence. Not the pots hanging from the carts, nor the bells on the animals made a sound. Babushka stared in wonder at the procession until it stopped at her cottage. At the end were 3 men who stepped into the snow and came towards her. The first wore a turban. The second had ribbons in his hair, and the third, whose skin was black, wore a many-fringed robe. The black man gestured toward the sky and asked, "Do you also follow the star?" Babushka looked through the falling snow and saw a bright, shimmering light. The man with the turban began. "That star will lead us to the king," finished the man with ribbons in his hair. The black man put his hand on Babushka's sleeve and said, "Come with us. We will take you to the king, and you can look into his face and share his delight when he sees the gifts we bring him." Babushka was confused. Leave her little cottage? "Oh, no, no, sir," she said. "I have to polish and sweep all day." But before she could finish, the three men turned and stepped into their cart. The black man nodded, and as silently as the procession halted, it proceeded on its way. The still confused Babushka watched until the torches grew dim and disappeared into the darkness. The next morning, when Babushka awoke, her mind was full of thoughts of dusting, sweeping, and polishing. She jumped from her bed to begin her chores. She went to the corner to get her broom. It wasn't there. Frantically, she looked everywhere, in the cupboard, under the bed, even on top of the warm stove. In desperation, Babushka opened the cottage door. There, she saw the broom, buried by the night's snow. Wrinkling her nose, Babushka again smelled cinnamon. "Is Aniushka still baking?" she asked herself. As she reached for the broom, her sleeve brushed across her nose. The warm, lovely smell of cinnamon was on her sleeve, where the black man had placed his hand. Babushka forgot the broom, the sweeping, the dusting, the polishing. She remembered the night before, the torches, the procession, but most of all, the three men. Babushka's heart beat fast. Abandoning her cottage, she wrapped her scarf around her head and ran down the road, hoping to catch up with the three men who were on their way to see the king. Many miles from where she started, she met a stranger who told her he'd heard the three men had found the king. He smiled as he said, and the king was but a child. Upon hearing this, the happy Babushka raced on. For day after day, year after year, Babushka searched. Every time she gazed into the eyes of a child, Babushka hoped it would be the king. Her hair lost its golden color and turned silver. Her clothes became worn and tattered and were often repaired. She forgot the cottage that had become covered with snow, the colored walls that had faded, and even the warm stove that had grown cold. Remembering the three men, she kept sweets or small toys in the pocket of her apron. They would be her gifts to the child, the king, when she could look on him. At night, a mother, glimpsing into a nursery, might see a strange old figure, but just as quickly the silent, shadowy shape would be gone. Then the mother would notice a small treat lying on the pillow by her child's head, and smell the faint smell of cinnamon that lingered in the air. "Babushka has been here," the mother would sigh knowingly. Old Babushka's search continued. She visited villages and cities, houses and castles, always leaving behind the scent of cinnamon and a gift. The children would wrinkle up their noses at the warm smell, but they loved the gifts, whether they were a small sweet in shining paper, which they promptly ate, or a wooden chicken or duck made by Babushka herself. They saved the tiny toys for their children, who in turn saved them for their children. So on and on, day after day, today and forever. Babushka continues her search. A baby laughs, the smell of cinnamon fills a room, and a tiny gift appears. We know, and we will always know. Babushka has been there. Babushka, who is still seeking the child who was born a king. Babushka, a Russian folk tale told at Christmas time. Sometimes stories travel from country to country. Babushka was a story told in Russia. By the time the story reached to Italy, the name of the lady had changed. And this time we have the Legend of Old Befana. In a small house on the outskirts of a small village in Italy lived Old Befana. She lived all alone and she wasn't very friendly. If any people dared to knock at her door, she never asked them in. "I have no time for visiting," Old Befana would say. The children didn't like her either. "Cranky old lady," they said, "and the way she's always sweeping." That was true. Every day, every morning and afternoon, Old Befana would sweep with her broom. She swept her little house, she swept her front step, and she even swept her walk all the way down to the road. Sometimes a delicious smell of things baking would drift from Old Befana's house. "Whom does she bake for?" her neighbors would ask. And some nights they thought they heard her singing lullabies. Crazy Old Befana, everybody called her. One evening, after Old Befana had eaten her dinner and swept her kitchen clean, she began to get ready for bed. She locked the door and shuttered the windows. Then she climbed into her bed, blew out the lamp, and fell asleep. In the middle of the night, Old Befana woke up. The room was bright. "How can that be?" she asked. "My lamp is out, my windows are shuttered, but still my house is filled with light." She got out of bed and crossed the cold floor. When she opened the shutter, a sudden burst of light poured into the room. In the eastern sky, she saw a brilliant star, which seemed to grow before her eyes. Said Old Befana, closing the shutter as tightly as she could. "How am I ever to get my sleep when the dark has turned to day?" All night she tossed and turned. She didn't sleep a wink. At dawn, Old Befana got up and dressed. She ate her breakfast, then took her broom as she always did, every day, every morning and afternoon. She swept her little house. She swept the front step, and she even swept the walk all the way down to the road. When she neared the road, Old Befana stopped and listened. She heard bells tinkling. "It's probably just the wind," she said. "Sweep, sweep, sweep." Again she heard the bells. "It's probably just the birds singing. Sweep, sweep, sweep." Once more she heard the sound. "My old ears play tricks," she said. "Sweep, sweep." Suddenly, over the hill came the most glorious procession Old Befana had ever seen. Camels, horses, elephants, and people. A splendid sight. Halfway back rode 3 royal-looking men, dressed in jeweled robes, wearing crowns upon their heads. The procession stopped. The 3 kings got down and came up to a frowning Old Befana. "Please," said one of the kings in a royal voice, "is this the way to Bethlehem?" "How can I say?" said Old Befana. "I never heard of it." And she began to sweep. "We're searching for the child," said the second king. "Do you know of him?" "There are many children," said Old Befana, sweeping still. "But this one is a king," said the third. "I know nothing of royal matters," she said. "Our books have told us," said the kings, "that when a bright new star appears, the child king will be born in Bethlehem." "The star I have seen," said old Befana. "It kept me awake all night. Now if you will excuse me, I have work to do." The procession started up again. "Old woman," called a boy who was leading a camel by, "you should come with us. This child, this baby king, has come to change the world. He comes for us. He comes for the poor. We are bringing him gifts." Old Befana paused. She watched the procession wind down the road. "A child king," she muttered. "Bethlehem, sweep, sweep, sweep. Coming to change the world, coming for the poor. Well, heaven knows old Befana is poor. Sweep, sweep. Gifts. Only a child." Old Befana went back into her house. "Perhaps I should go see him. But what do I have to take him?" She put down her broom. She got out some butter and sugar and flour. She blew on the fire and added some wood, and she began to sing. She baked all day. She didn't even sweep. It was almost dark when she finished. Then she filled a basket with all the cakes, cookies, and candies she had made. "I'll take a few coals in a little pot to keep the cookies warm," she said. She put on a shawl and opened the door. "And I'll take along my broom to sweep the room clean, for the baby king's mother will be tired." Old Befana stopped. She hadn't swept all day. "It won't take me long," she said. She put down the basket and began to sweep. She swept her little house. She swept her front step. And she even swept the walk all the way down to the road. Then she locked her door and gathered up her basket. She pulled her shawl around her and took up her broom. Old Befana was on her way at last. She ran at first, ran and ran as fast as her legs would carry her. The sun had set, but still she ran. Now the star shone brightly. Her breath came short, her old legs ached, but still she ran, a little bit slower, and at last she sat beside the road. Old Befana could run no more. "I should never have left so late. I should have left earlier. I'll never catch up," she cried. "And where is Bethlehem?" She closed her eyes and gave a long sigh. "I'll never find the baby king." Suddenly the sky was filled with light, and heavenly angels sang, "Glory to all men, the new king is born. Tonight is the night of miracles." Old Befana rose to her feet. Tell me where he is," she cried, picking up her basket and broom. "I bring gifts to the child." She began to walk, then run again. "This is the night of miracles," the angels sang once more. "Wait," she shouted, "you must help me. Show me the way to Bethlehem." Old Befana began to feel lighter. She ran faster and faster, so fast it took her breath away. She was running in the sky. It was a night of miracles. Old Befana never caught up, alas. She never found the child in Bethlehem, but she is searching still to this day. Every year on the Feast of the Three Kings, January the 6th, Old Befana runs across the sky. She visits all children while they sleep and leaves them gifts from her basket. Then she takes her broom and sweeps the old room all clean. For, after all, says Old Befana, I never know which child might be the baby king of Bethlehem. This is an old Italian tale, the legend of Old Befana. The Clown of God, an old story told and illustrated by Tomie dePaola. This is a French legend. Many, many years ago in Sorrento, there lived a small boy named Giovanni who had no mother and no father. He dressed in rags and begged his bread and slept in doorways. But he was happy, and he could do something wonderful. He could juggle. Every day he would go to Signor Baptista's fruit and vegetable stall and juggle. He would juggle lemons and oranges, apples and eggplants, and even zucchini. Crowds would gather to watch, and when Giovanni had finished, they would buy from Signor Baptista. Then Signor Baptista's wife would give Giovanni a bowl of hot soup. It was a very good arrangement. One day a troop of traveling players came to the town, and Giovanni watched as Arlecchino and Colombina, in their beautiful clothes, danced and sang. "Oh," Giovanni said to himself, "that is the life for me." So when the play was over, Giovanni went and spoke to the maestro. "No, no," said the maestro, "I have no need for a ragamuffin. Go beg your bread somewhere else." "But I could be very helpful," pleaded Giovanni. "I could help unpack and pack up. I could take care of the donkey. And maestro," added Giovanni, "I can juggle." "Not bad," said the maestro, watching. "With a bit more training and practice." "All right, but no money, a place to sleep, and companionship of the finest players in Italy, and a bowl of noodles, that's all." "Grazie, signor," said Giovanni. "Go get your things. We leave in an hour," said the maestro. And so Giovanni said goodbye to Signor and Signora Baptista and became a traveling player. Not long after, the maestro gave him a costume, and Giovanni juggled for the crowds. He would put on a clown's face, step out from the curtain before the play began, bow, open up a colorful bag, roll out a carpet, and begin. He would juggle sticks, plates. Then he would balance the plates on the sticks and twirl them. He would juggle clubs, rings, and burning torches. Finally, he would toss a red ball and an orange ball, then a yellow ball, a green, a blue, and a violet ball, until it looked as if he were juggling the rainbow. "And now for the sun in the heavens," he would cry. Still juggling, he would pick up a shining gold ball and toss it higher and higher, faster and faster, and how the crowds would cheer. Giovanni became very famous, and it wasn't long before he said goodbye to the traveling troupe and set off on his own. Up and down Italy he traveled, and although his costume became more beautiful, he always kept the face of a clown. Once he juggled for a duke, once for a prince, and it was always the same. First the sticks, then plates, then the clubs, rings and burning torches, finally the rainbow of colored balls. "And now for the sun in the heavens," he would shout, and the golden ball would fly higher and higher, and the crowds would laugh and clap and cheer. One day between two towns, Giovanni was sitting in the shade of a tree, eating a lunch of bread and cheese. Two little brothers came down the road. "Will you share your food with us, good clown?" they asked, "for the love of God and the blessings of our brother Francis." "Sit down, good fellows," Giovanni said. "There is more than enough." As the three men ate, the two little brothers told Giovanni how they went from town to town begging their food and spreading the joy of God. "Our founder, Brother Francis, says that everything sings of the glory of God." "Why, even your juggling," said one of the brothers. "That's well and good for men like you, but I only juggle to make people laugh and applaud," Giovanni said. "It's the same thing," the brothers said. "If you give happiness to people, you give glory to God as well." "If you say so," said Giovanni, laughing. "But now I must be off to the next town. Arrivederci, good brothers, and good luck." And wherever Giovanni went, the air was filled with his flying sticks and plates, his clubs and rings and torches, and always, his rainbow of balls and the sun in the heavens. And wherever Giovanni went, the faces of the crowds would be all smiles, and the sounds of laughter and cheers would ring through the towns. Years passed. Giovanni grew old and times became hard. People no longer stopped to watch. "It's only the old clown who juggles things. We've all seen him before," they said. Giovanni was sad, but still he juggled, until one day he dropped the sun in the heavens, and the rainbow of balls came crashing down, and the crowd stood around him and laughed, but not from joy. Then they did a terrible thing. They threw vegetables and stones at Giovanni so that he had to run for his life. Beside a stream, Giovanni took off his clown face. He put away his sticks and his plates, his clubs and rings and colored balls. He put away his costume, and he gave up juggling forever. What little money he had soon was gone, and his clothes became rags, and he begged his bread and slept in doorways as he had done as a child. "It's time to go home," the old man said wearily, and he headed back to Sorrento. It was a cold winter night when he finally arrived. The wind blew hard, and an icy rain was falling. Up ahead loomed the monastery church of the Little Brothers. The windows were in darkness. Wet and cold, old Giovanni crept inside and fell in a heap in a corner. Soon he was asleep. It was the music that woke him up. The church was blazing with candlelight and filled with people singing "Gloria, Gloria." Giovanni could scarcely believe his eyes. So much beauty! A long procession of brothers, priests, sisters, and townspeople, all carrying beautiful gifts, was winding its way through the church. They placed their gifts in front of a statue of a lady and her child. "What is all this?" asked old Giovanni of someone standing near. "Why, old man, it's the birthday of the Holy Child," the woman said. "It's the procession of the gifts." Giovanni watched in amazement until the singing was over. Then the church emptied of all the people and was darkened except for the bright candles surrounding the lady and the child. Giovanni moved closer. The child in the lady's arms seemed so serious, so stern. "Oh, lady," said Giovanni, "I wish I had something to offer too. Your child seems so sad, even with all these beautiful gifts. But wait, I used to make people smile." Giovanni opened his bag and shook out his old costume. Then he put on his clown face, bowed, rolled out the little rug, and began to juggle. First the sticks, then the plates. Next he twirled the plates on the sticks, and then the clubs and rings. The brother sexton, who was coming in to lock the doors, saw Giovanni juggling. He was horrified. "Father, master," he cried, rushing off to get the priest. "A sacrilege! Come quickly!" But Giovanni didn't hear or notice him. "And now," said Giovanni, smiling at the face of the child, "first the red ball, then the orange, next the yellow, and the green, blue, and violet." Around and up they went until they looked like a rainbow. And finally, cried Giovanni, "the sun in the heavens!" The gold ball flew up and around, higher and higher. Giovanni had never juggled so well in all his life. Higher and higher, faster and faster, a blaze of color filled the air. It was magnificent. Giovanni's heart was pounding. For you, sweet child, for you, he cried. And then, suddenly, his old heart stopped, and Giovanni fell dead to the floor. The priest and brother sexton came rushing in. Stooping over old Giovanni, the priest said, "Why, the poor clown is dead. May his soul rest in peace." But the brother sexton backed away, and with his mouth wide open, he stared at the statue of the lady and her holy child. "Oh, Father," he said, pointing, "oh, Father, look!" The child was smiling, and in his hand he held the golden ball. The story of the Clown of God.